Well, welcome to lecture number 114. And we are right now in book 3 of the Moreh Nevuchim in the Venus edition, this volume 2, uh, page 510. We are about to start chapter 27. And Rambam has been telling us that he's about to start explaining the Ta'amei HaMitzvot, the reasons for the laws of the Torah, why they make sense, and why they are, and what the purpose of them are. What's their purpose? Why are we keeping these rules? So well, hopefully we'll cover today chapters 27 and 28, and there's a lot of cool stuff. So I want to get straight down to business. So chapter 27. The law, the Torah, I'm translating it as the Torah, as the Goodman-Lieberman edition translate the law as the Torah, as a whole aims at two things: the welfare of the soul and the welfare of the body. So there's two general things. The Torah wants to make sure that our bodies, our health is in good shape, and that our soul is in good shape. So, and according to Rambam, as you know, this shouldn't come to surprise to any of us. As for the welfare of the soul, it consists of the multitudes acquiring correct opinions corresponding to their respective capacity. It's all about intellectual perfection, achieving truth, learning truth, acquiring knowledge of truth, of God, knowledge of God, knowledge of what's real. That's the bottom line when it comes, in Rambam's understanding. That's the welfare of the soul. That's the ultimate goal to achieve. Therefore, some of them, in other words, namely the opinions, meaning some of the basic ideas that the Torah teaches, are set forth explicitly, and some are set forth in parables, right? There are some ideas that the Torah says it straight up, there's one God, and Rambam will give examples that the Torah says many times, and it says it very clearly. There's no doubt about it. No matter what your intellectual level, if you simply know how to read, you can read that in the Torah. But there's other ideas in the Torah that are brought out in different ways, things that, for the reason for it, is not within the nature of the common multitude, that its capacity should suffice for apprehending the subject matter as it is, right? In other words, it just happens to be that, and it's just the nature of human beings, that the majority of people can't necessarily understand every concept just straight up. So some concepts are taught, straight up, and some concepts, the ones that people can understand, people can grasp. Other concepts that the Torah teaches that are important for us to develop our souls are written in ways that those that are intelligent, those that have the capacity, can learn and understand them from the parables, from the stories, the lessons, etc., that the Torah tells us. Now, as for the welfare of the body, what about the welfare of our body, our health? It comes about by the improvement of their ways of living one with another. The primary health of our bodies comes from interactions between human beings, how we deal with one another. In other words, building a healthy society is, in order for there to be a healthy society, the primary thing that's necessary is that people can get along with each other in a proper way. So this is achieved through two things. There's two aspects to health and the health of society, which leads to the health of all the people within that society. One of them is the abolition of their wronging each other. The obvious one is mitzvos that teach us, not to do bad things to each other, right? This is tantamount to every individual among the people not being permitted to act according to his will and up to the limits of his power. You can't just do anything just because you can, right? But rather being forced to do that which is useful to the whole. We have to involve ourselves in activities that are good for society, that are good for the other people around us, not just things that are good for us, right? And that's one category of things. The second thing consists in the acquisition by every human individual of moral qualities that are useful for life in society, so that the affairs of the city may be ordered. So not only do we not do the things that would harm one another, but we also do the things that are beneficial to one another. Okay? So these are pretty straightforward. Know, however, that between these two aims, in other words, the body and the soul, right, one is indubitably greater in nobility, namely the welfare of the soul. I mean, the procuring of correct opinions, right? So, our spiritual growth is more important than our physical health. It's the ultimate goal. And again, the Rambam emphasizes that what does he mean by spiritual growth? He means intellectual perfection, understanding and contemplating and achieving as close to the truth as possible. Um, it is prior in nature and time, right? But although one is, I'm sorry, while the second aim, I mean the welfare of the body, is prior in nature and time. I skipped a line by accident. Sorry. So in other words, our spiritual welfare, meaning our achieving knowledge of truth, is the more important one. But the one that comes first is our being better in our health and our body and the way we interact with each other. That's necessary as a step in order to achieve the greater goal. The latter aim, right, consists in the governance of the city and the well-being of the states of all its people according to their capacity. This second aim is the more certain one, and it is the one regarding with which every effort has been made precisely to expound it in all its particulars. For the first aim, which is the spiritual, can only be achieved after achieving the second one. So the one that's second in importance needs to come first in chronology. For it has already been demonstrated, I'm at the top of page 511, that man has two perfections. A first perfection, which is perfection of the body, and an ultimate perfection, which is perfection of the soul. The first perfection consists in being healthy and in the very best bodily state, and this is only possible through his finding the things necessary for him whenever he seeks them, right? So it needs to be that a person that has needs, has physical needs, can have those needs satisfied, right? These are his food and all the other things needed for the governance of his body, such as a shelter, bathing, and so forth. All the things that human beings need to be secure, safe, and healthy. This cannot be achieved in any way by one isolated individual. A person cannot be healthy if they're alone. In other words, all of the rules that govern our interactions with one another are important because for each individual to achieve spiritual perfection, he needs to be among others, right? For an individual can only attain for can only attain all this through a political association, and it being already known that man is political by nature. It uses the term political is goes well would have been better term for when Shlomo Pincus wrote this thing here. He calls it a man in the more modern translation into English. Man is a social animal, right? A man is a social being. We know that the people thrive among others. They don't thrive themselves when they're alone. I mean to have an intellect in actu, right? And I'm sorry, his ultimate perfection, though, is to become rational in actu. I mean to have an intellect in actu. But the ultimate perfection that one achieves, for which health is necessary, is to achieve the heights intellectually. This would consist in his knowing everything. What's the perfection? Is to know everything concerning all the beings that it is within the capacity of man to know in accordance with his ultimate perfection. And the Rambam has emphasized this many times. And if you remember way back in the first chelek, in the first section, when he mentioned that Moshe Rabbeinu, his achievement was achieved through knowing everything there was possible to know about the science of the world. Everything there is to know about nature, Moshe knew, and in that way he achieved the ultimate in spiritual perfection. It is clear that to this ultimate perfection there do not belong either actions or moral qualities, right? In theory, right, it's not a moral thing, right? Having that intellectual perfection is not a moral thing. It's a knowing that knowledge. It's having access to that knowledge. It consists only of opinions. It's ideas, right? We use the term opinions, but it really means ideas, philosophical understandings, right? That one has to achieve, toward which speculation has led and investigation has rendered compulsory. Speculation meaning thinking, and investigation is what we would call today experimentation and investigating to find out what's really going on in the world around us. So, But it is also clear that this noble and ultimate perfection can only be achieved after the first perfection has been achieved. But in order to get there, one first has to have a healthy society where human beings get along with one another, where everyone has access to adequate nutrition, has shelter, they have warmth, they have the clothing they need to wear, they have water to bathe in, they have all the things that human beings need. For a man cannot represent to himself an intelligible. He can't sit and contemplate the wonders of the universe and the unity of God and all kinds of lofty concepts and all kinds of philosophical ideas, even when taught to understand it, even if someone's trying to shove it down your throat, right? And all the more cannot become aware of it of his own accord if he is in pain or is very hungry or thirsty or is hot or is cold, right? It's not going to work. If you don't have food to eat, you're not going to have time. If we didn't eat dinner, we wouldn't be able to sit down and have this class. For those of us that ate dinner already, for those of us that haven't, if you didn't know that after this lecture is over, you're going to have something to eat, it would be very difficult to focus on all these lofty ideas. But once the first perfection has been achieved, it is possible to achieve the ultimate. But once you get through health, and once you have set up a society where people get along with each other, people aren't fighting with each other, people are working to make sure that everyone has what they need to live, now we can get down to the spiritual work together to try to achieve these great levels. The ultimate, which is indubitably more noble, and it is the only cause of permanent preservation. And in the end, what leads to the permanent preservation of human beings is achieving the spiritual level that we're trying to achieve. So remember, Rambam is laying this down now because he's laying down the groundwork for explaining to us the reasons for the Torah. So he's just explained to us all of the laws of the Torah that fit into that category, that fit into the category of helping human beings get along with one another. So, I mean, obvious things, you're not allowed to steal, you're not allowed to cheat, you're not allowed to lie. Those are things that you're not supposed to do, because if you do them, it interrupts the ability of human beings achieving this physical perfection. And what should you do? You should give charity. You should take care of others. You should lend people money when at low interest, not at usurious rates, but so that people have what they need and they can make a living and so on and so forth. Those are the kinds of things that we need to build this society. The true Torah, then, and I'm starting the second paragraph now on 511, which we have already made clear is unique, namely the law of Moshe Rabbeinu, the law of Moses, our master. And it has come to bring us both perfections. The greatness of the Torah, Rambam is saying, is that it's bringing us both of these things. Number one, the mitzvot are teaching us physical perfection, how to build a proper society. And number two, it's teaching us ideas and concepts that enable us to achieve intellectual perfection. That's what makes the Torah so special. It's not just a book of laws, how to build a good society, and it's not just a book of philosophy that tells us what we're supposed to believe and what we're supposed to know, but rather it has both. It has both qualities. I mean, the welfare of the states of people and their relations with one another through the abolition of reciprocal wrongdoing and through the acquisition of a noble and excellent character. In this way, the preservation of the population of the country and their permanent existence in the same order become possible, so that everyone achieves his first perfection, right? I mean, also the soundness of the beliefs and the giving of correct opinions through which ultimate perfection is achieved. So that's what the Torah teaches us all. It builds a good society. It leads to healthy people. This is very important because what the Rambam is really telling us here is that and it sounds simple on the face of it, but if you really think about it, it's deeper than it seems, because what he's saying here is that when the Torah tells us, right, you should give charity, you should be kind to your neighbor, you shouldn't lie. What you're doing is that is how you ensure that everyone in the society is healthy. It's a logical, reasonable way to build a healthy society. So it's not that, so sometimes you might take the thing that, oh, you give tzedakah, so it's like some people might have a different kind of attitude, like a kind of you get credits, right? And then God pays you back with credits. That's not how the Rambam is building it. He's building this as a very, very logical way. If you want a society that works, if everyone cooperates with each other, then you're much more likely to have a society where everyone has something to eat, where the wealthy people share with the poor, then you're not going to have starvation. If you equitably and fairly distribute I'm not arguing for communism here. I don't mean to go down that route. I'm just saying, but if you have a fair and equitable way where people get along with each other, help each other, and don't hurt each other, you're more likely to have a healthy society, and you're more likely to have a society where people can pursue higher goals of spirituality. The letter of the Torah speaks of both perfections and informs us that the end of his law in its entirety, what's the purpose of it all, right, is the achievement of these two perfections. Um, and I just want to pull out the Hebrew here so I have it in front of me. Right? So because as it says, for he may be exalted, God says in the Torah, "Vayetzavenu Hashem la'asos es kol hachokim ha'ela." God commanded us to do all of these laws. Why? Liyiras Hashem Elokeinu, in order to fear God. Litov lanu kol hayamim l'chayosenu kayom hazeh, in order that it should be good for us all these days. Kayom to give us life. Kayom hazeh. In other words, all of these laws are designed in such a way that it brings life, it brings health to all of us, right? So if we keep the laws of the Torah, people are much more likely to be healthy, right? If we give a portion of our field to the poor, we give our leftover food to the poor. We make sure we separate and make sure the priestly caste that aren't working, that they have their share, and everyone has their share, and we don't cheat each other, we don't steal from each other, and we don't kill each other, or beat, so on and so forth. We're much more likely to have a good, healthy life, and that's the purpose of the Torah, and that's how Rambam understands this pasuk. Here he puts the ultimate perfection first, right? Because of its nobility. First, he says to have yira, to have fear, or really, fear is a much better translation is awe of God, because that's the ultimate goal, right? Right? It's to have awe for God. For as we have explained, it's the ultimate end, and it is referred to in this dictum for our good always, right? L'chayus, l'man yitav l'chav v'yarachti yamim, right? L'tov lanu kol hayamim, that should be good for us all these days. You know already what the Chazal have said, having interpreted his dictum, may he be exalted. The Chazal had said, "L'man yitav l'cha v'yarachti yamim," right? That it may be well with thee and that it may prolong thy days. So Chazal had said, right? L'man yitav l'cha l'yom shekulo tov, that it may be well with thee in a world in which everything is well, and that thou mayest prolong thy days in a world the whole of which is long. So, and Rambam is understanding this Chazal to say that if you keep the laws of the Torah, you will have a long life, you will have a healthy life, and you'll have the opportunity for spiritual growth. Similarly, the intention of his dictum here, right, for our good always, right, meaning l'tov lanu kol hayamim, right, it should be good for all days, is the same notion. I mean, the attainment of a world in which everything is well and the whole of which is long. And this is perpetual preservation. The world will last a lot longer if we get along with each other and we treat each other fairly, and so on. On the other hand, his dictum, when God says, right, l'chayosenu kayom hazeh, that he might preserve us alive as this day, refers to the first and corporeal preservation. That refers to the life that we achieve. In other words, that's the first step, is we need to achieve a healthy life, which lasts for a certain duration, and which can only be well ordered through political association, as we have explained. So that is the first set of rules here. So understand the Rambam is laying out the overall purpose of the Torah here is to set us up in a society where we're much more likely, if we follow these rules, to be healthy, to work together, and be able then to devote time towards the ultimate goal, which is spiritual perfection, which the Rambam understands to be intellectual achievement and knowledge of truth. So it's the perfect time to hold and if anyone, I see there's a hand up, so go ahead, Yosef.
I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but this confuses me, because if the law was given to us for our benefit, how could Hashem punish the people of Sodom for making rules that were against the Torah if the Torah wasn't yet revealed to the world? I'm not even sure if this is the right point to ask that, but I think because he's talking, because one of the things that the rabbi said was that the fact that Sodom had laws, except they were antisocial laws, and so, um, but
No,
and
so I mean, those laws were the diametrically opposed. They're the exact opposite of the Torah's laws, right?
yeah,
So those were laws which instead of bringing about the maximum health benefit, social benefit, and economic benefit to the people, it brought about a situation where people took advantage of each other, and most people did not was not were not able to achieve, health and peace.
all I'm asking is basically how were they supposed to figure out that there's better laws if it wasn't yet revealed to the world? Abraham maybe knew what is going on with his nephew, but not he never. I promise you that he never
Yeah.
visited him in Sodom.
Right. Um,
I can't promise it, but I'm pretty sure that.
Well, I think, I mean, to some extent. So, like, let's see, the Rambam mentioned here, right? He said that the greatness of the Torah is that it shows both, right? It shows the physical law, the laws that lead to the physical and social health of society, plus the goals of those laws, which are and the Torah teaches us ideas which lead to the spiritual achievement of the society. So I think the Rambam is also subtly conceding that you have other systems which teach philosophical truths alone, right? And you have other systems which teach social truths, all right, and social justice alone, right? And those are things that without the Torah you can figure out, right? A philosopher can sit and study the world and come up with all kinds of ideas, right? Right? But and you can have a political leader who sets up a society with rules and laws and a system of government that equitably shares resources and so on, and makes laws that people can get along with each other. And those are things that we can achieve without the Torah. But the Torah is telling us how we're supposed to that A is supposed to lead to B, right? And that's what I think. So I think prior to the Torah, you still should have figured out, right, how to get along with each other, right? What the Torah is telling us is, okay, now we're getting along with each other. Now let's go and learn, right? And achieve intellectual perfection, right? In other words, we're not supposed to just get along with each other just so that we can have a good meal to eat, right? We're supposed to and be healthy. We're supposed to be healthy so that we can achieve something higher. And I think that's so, but I don't think that I think it's pretty clear from what he's saying though that either one of these two on their own is not necessary is I mean is a great achievement, but you don't necessarily need the Torah for that. But what we need the Torah for is to teach us how we're supposed to go from A to B. I think that's how I would probably answer the question that you're asking. Um, okay, so this parak is a pretty straightforward parak. It's important though to bear in mind as we learn through the chapters to follow about the reasons for the mitzvot. So we understand like a broad um, idea, like the concepts, how this is going to be broken down. But any other comments before we hit 28? Okay, well,
Does
feel free.
I-
Go ahead.
does the Rambam uh, discuss how to organize the government or the external reality in order to achieve
You mean like a system of government?
yeah. Does he
So it's an interesting question because well, not really. In the Rambam's idea, and the only system of government that he was familiar with was some form of monarchy, right?
okay?
And so you know, and this is interesting because for a lot of reasons, it's going to be relevant when I do start my other lecture that I said I was going to start about Mashiach, right? And to some of us today, the idea of a person who's going to come and lead us when we are raised on the democratic ideas where it's not a person, but we have a three branches of government and checks and balances, and we have a whole different idea of what a government structure ideally should be. and the idea of a king is somewhat distasteful to us, right? But if you imagine, and if you go to the Rambam's day, and certainly the day of Tanakh, right, the only form of government that really existed was a king. Now, the Torah does set up a government where there is some checks and balances. There's a king, there's a there's a priesthood, right? So there's a separation of church and state, and there's also a Sanhedrin. There's a lawmaking body that has so there are different, but it's still a lot of power invested in the king. So in the Rambam's world, a good place is a king that's wise and just. That's how his examples are always going to be a king who's thinking about the welfare of the people and passes laws and enforces them in a fair, equitable, reasonable way, right? Now, I mean, you and I might say, well, hey, people are almost always corrupted, and you have a king, almost always they end up going somewhere in the wrong direction, which may be true, but the reason why this is important when we talk about Mashiach in another lecture is is Mashiach a person, right? Or maybe a Mashiach is an ideal system of government, but we can deal with that later. Maybe the only but that's totally off topic for this subject, but it's something that I think about a lot, and a lot of people address this issue. Because in modern times, to tell us, oh, I'm waiting for the Messiah, the guy who's going to save us. Well, to some people that might sound good, but to other people I don't want a king. you know, who wants a dictator? It doesn't sound very good. But we'll deal with that in another thing. But in the Rambam, it's a king, right? Who's ruling. I see another hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought a king is a later phenomenon. Thinking the Saul Samuel debate that really the Jews shouldn't have a king, but there's only other people that have kings, and reluctantly
This is
Saul went along with them.
it's an excellent point. I can't remember the title of the book. There's a professor in Israel. His last name is Knohl, Knohl. I think it's Israel is his first name. So he wrote a whole book on this, on what you on the idea of a like that and the Gemara says we learned in Daf Yomi a couple of weeks back. Machlokas, one of the Tanaim say, a king is not an ideal. A king is a b'diavad. A king is we asked for it, so God kind of conceded and said, "Okay, I'll give you a king." But had there never been a king, we wouldn't be dreaming about a Messiah king, right? Right? Ideally, we should never have needed a king. So the idea of a Mashiach is a later idea, but this is a really good, interesting subject. But it's not. We're going way off the field.
Okay.
But yeah, ideally, it seems at least there's different schools of thought. There's a machlokas tanaim. Some say in the Gemara that a king is the ideal. Some say that it's not. But according to those that say a king is not an ideal, right? Then the whole concept, the whole idea of waiting for a person to come and lead us to, to wherever, to redemption it didn't make sense in that period of time. It can't be that that's the ultimate goal if the Torah doesn't even want us to have a king in the first place.
Right.
It's a lot of interesting stuff to think about, but and definitely very worthwhile subject. It's one of the reasons why I want to give that talk. I've been preparing it in my brain for a long time, but I'm almost ready to hit the button and start. But yeah, any other comments on chapter 27 before we go on to 28? All right, so just it's really quick recap. The Torah combines two goals. There's two main reasons why it's there. Number one, to give a healthy society so that we have healthy people and create an environment where people have what they need physically and socially and politically, so that they can then focus their attention on the much loftier, much more important goal of intellectual achievement and perfection and knowledge, which the Rambam defines as ultimate spiritual accomplishment. Chapter 28, page 512. Among the things to which your attention ought to be directed is that you should know that in regard to the correct opinions through which the ultimate perfection may be obtained. So now he's going to go on. Remember, the Torah teaches correct opinions, right? So according to Rambam, that means there's no today we kind of have this divide between science and philosophy. In those days, Rambam doesn't have a differentiation between science and philosophy. Science, philosophy is one and the same. It's truth, right? Finding the truth, right? How do you explain everything that you need to explain about the world and the universe that we live in? So the Torah regards to those correct opinions through which the ultimate perfection may be obtained. The Torah has communicated only their end and made a call to believe in them in a summary way. The Torah tells us the end of the story, right? What does he mean? That is, to believe in the existence of the deity, the fact that there is a creator. Bereshis bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created, right? However you want to translate that verse, you can a million different ways. But the bottom line, there's a creator, right? Now remember, Rambam himself went through chapters and chapters describing why he thinks there's a creator and why he disagrees with Aristotle, who said there isn't a creator. And those are all highfalutin philosophical ideas that books and books and books have been written. Is there a creator? Is there not a creator? Can you prove there's a creator? Can you not prove? If there is a creator, what does that mean? All that stuff is not in the Torah, right? So in order to achieve that, you got a lot of work to do that's not written in the Torah, right? But the Torah does tell us that there's a creator, right? Or may he be exalted, and his unity. And he's only one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is one. There's only one, right? And again, so you can argue, there's creators. Is there 2 creators? Is there 3? Is there 9? Is there 10? Is there 8 million? Who knows? But the Torah tells us there's one. And then you can philosophically try to prove that that's the case, or try to come to that understanding. His knowledge, that God has an awareness of what's going on in this world. That's something that the Torah communicates to us in many different ways, right? His power, his will, and his eternity. All of these ideas are found within the Torah, but how to come to those ideas are not. All these points are ultimate ends, which can be made clear in detail and through definitions only after one knows many opinions. If you really want to come to achieve those things and understand those things, you got a lot of work to do, right? You got a lot of studying to do. You got a lot of reading to do. You got a lot of debates and discussions to have, right? So what the Rambam here is saying is he clearly doesn't believe in the idea of a blind faith, right? Right? In other words, the Torah says so. I believe that God is one because there are those thinkers, right, who will argue that it's better just to have faith. God is one because God is one. The Rambam isn't into that, right? That's not the Rambam. There are other thinkers that say that, but not him. He says, yes, the Torah teaches us that idea, but you got a lot of work to get there. In the same way, the Torah also makes a call to adopt certain beliefs, belief in which is necessary for the sake of political welfare. This is also true about the other category of things, right? Certain things that are necessary, such as our belief that he may be exalted, is violently angry with those who disobey him, and is therefore necessary to fear him and to dread him and to take care not to disobey. So the Torah also tells us things which are important pieces of knowledge only insofar as they instill in us behaviors that are conducive to a better society. So what the Rambam is saying is like this. Remember that he's emphasized this many times. God doesn't get angry, right? Angry is a human emotion, right? To state that God is angry is just wrong. It's philosophical. It's just not true. God is not a human being. He doesn't get mad, right? You and I get mad, right? God doesn't get mad. But the Torah describes it that way because it's necessary for the society, for the general society walking around to think, well, if I act in a bad way, God will be mad at me, right? So it instills in people fear from doing bad things. But the real reason why you shouldn't do bad things is because what Rambam said last chapter is because if you do bad things, you have a bad society and people suffer, and then those people don't have an opportunity to achieve spiritual perfection. So the real reason why we shouldn't be doing them is not because God is going to get mad, right? But the Torah expresses it that way because that's a way that the general population can understand and internalize, and it can be an incentive to drive people towards good behavior. With regard to all other correct opinions concerning the whole of being, opinions that constitute the numerous kinds of all the theoretical sciences through which the opinions forming the ultimate end are validated, And what about all those other ideas, right? All the other knowledge of science and philosophy that you need to go through in order to achieve the ultimate knowledge of truth, right? The Torah, albeit it does not make a call to direct attention toward them in detail. The Torah doesn't tell us all the scientific facts that we need to know in order to understand the universe, right? The Torah is not a science book. It doesn't tell you biology. It doesn't tell you, it's chemistry, right? All of those things, which if we did study them and if we do understand them, we will through that come to an incredible knowledge of God and a knowledge of truth, and ultimately achieve spiritual perfection through achieving that knowledge. The Torah isn't a book about that stuff, right? As it does with regard to the opinions forming the ultimate ends, right? Does do this in summary fashion by saying to love the Lord. The Torah tells us. How does the Torah tell us? This is fascinating, and this is consistent with the Rambam throughout Mishnah Torah and here. How does one achieve love of God? By studying the world around us, by appreciating everything but the Torah doesn't tell us to study. It doesn't teach us about the mountains, and it doesn't teach us about the water cycle and the clouds and the rain and the rivers and evaporation. It doesn't teach us about the incredible mechanisms that form life and so on and plants and all these things. But it tells us to love God. And how does one achieve love of God? By achieving knowledge of nature, right? And because we achieve love of God by knowledge of nature, when the Torah tells us to love God, that's the same kind of idea as telling us God is one, without giving us all the philosophical arguments that one would need to go through in order to prove to him or herself that God is one, right? This is a remarkable thing that the Rambam is saying over here, because he laid down two things over here that we can't overlook. In this paragraph so far, he's laid down, number one, the idea that that God doesn't get angry. And when the Torah tells us that God gets angry, right, it just means to convey to us the idea that doing bad stuff brings about bad things in society. So think of it as if God is getting mad at you. So it's like the Torah is almost like a ruse. It's written in such a way that the common folk should walk around thinking that God gets mad. Don't do this because God will be mad at you. But it's really a childish way of thinking of things. You shouldn't do it because it's a bad thing, because if people did all this, then you'd have a bad society, right? It's kind of like, I always wonder, if you think about if you're driving at 2:00 in the morning and you come to a red light and there's nobody else around, right? Do you just go through the light or not? I mean, nowadays there's traffic cams and who knows what, but let's assume there's no traffic cam, right? God's not going to be angry at you, right? The cops aren't going to be angry at you, and the guy going the other way, because there are no cops around and there is nobody going the other way. So nobody's going to be mad at you, right? The problem is that if you keep doing that, you end up with a society where people aren't keeping the rules. And the next thing you know, someone's going to get into an accident and get hurt, right? So the reason why you should do it is not because God's going to be angry, but you shouldn't do it because it will bring about a society that's not proper. Okay, so now, so ultimately, how this is confirmed in the dictum regarding love, with all thy heart, with all thy soul, we say this in Shema every day, twice a day, right? Right? We have already explained in the Mishnah Torah that this love becomes valid. How does one come to love God? Only through the apprehension of the whole of being as it is, right? Understanding the entire world of nature as nature actually is, right? This is very important. Rambam emphasizes this over and over again. Studying the world for as it actually is, not how you want it to be, not how you think it should be, not how the way you want it to be so that it conforms to whatever your preconceived notions are, but actually how it really is, and the consideration of his wisdom as it is manifested in it. And when one studies the world around, one sees the wisdom of God everywhere in the world we see around us. We have also mentioned the fact that the sages, may their memory be blessed, call attention to this notion. We discussed this in Mishnah Torah at length. Hopefully, Bli Neder. So, I think I already decided that when we do finish Moreh Nevuchim, we're going to go on to continue studying Rambam, but many of his other works. So we're not going to do the whole Mishnah Torah, but I think Sefer Mada, right? Where he talks about his ideas, opinions, etc. We should do Sefer Mada next, and maybe Sefer HaMitzvos, or at least introduction. Shmona Prakim. There's a lot of things we're going to study from the Rambam, with God willing, in the future. But anyway, so what results from what we have now stated as a premise regarding this subject is, so with all the stuff that we just said, is that whenever a commandment, be it a prescription or a prohibition, whether it tells us to do something or not to do something, it requires abolishing reciprocal wrongdoing or urging to a noble moral quality leading to a good social relationship, or communicating a correct opinion that ought to be believed, either on account of itself or because it is necessary for the abolition of reciprocal wrongdoing or for the acquisition of a noble moral quality. Such a commandment has a clear cause and is of a manifest utility. So the mitzvot that make sense make a lot of sense. Either the things that create more goodwill between people, things that take away bad will from between people, things that are correct and proper opinions that we should have and knowledge that we should know, and things that lead to such behaviors and such intellectual knowledge and achievement. Those are obvious and clear. No question concerning the end need be posed with regard to such commandments. We don't need to waste too much time explaining the reasons for such commandments, because they're obvious, right? For no one was ever so perplexed for a day as to ask why we are commanded by the law that God is one. Well, the Rambam might say that, but nowadays people might ask the question. But all I'm saying, it's so obvious, it's important for us to understand the unity of God. So no one's going to sit and ask why the Torah tells me that, because it's a major basic concept, right? So we understand why the Torah tells us that God is one, or why we were, and that's on the intellectual side, why we were forbidden to kill and steal. Nobody's going to come to you in the street and say, what kind of a Torah is that? Why does it tell you you're not allowed to kill somebody? I think you should be allowed to kill. Most people understand why it makes sense that you shouldn't be allowed to do such things, or why we were forbidden to exercise vengeance or retaliation, right? Why you shouldn't, take revenge, or why we were ordered to love each other. We were ordered to, we should love each other. These are understandable rules that we all get. It's all basic. The matters about which people are perplexed and opinions disagree, so that some say there is no utility in them at all, except the fact of mere command. There are other things where some people say, well, I don't understand the reason for this. And then they say, oh, must be, we're only doing it because God said so, right? Whereas others say, oh, no, there is a utility, but it is hidden from us. There is a reason, but we don't know the reason, right? So those are the commandments from whose external meaning it does not appear that they are useful according to one of the three notions we have mentioned, right? It doesn't seem on the surface to have a reason. It doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't have any one of the three reasons which we said. I mean to say, they neither communicate an opinion, they don't teach us an idea, nor inculcate a noble quality, nor abolish reciprocal wrongdoing. Apparently, these commandments are not related to the welfare of the soul, right? As they do not communicate a belief, right? They don't give us any special idea, right? Or to the welfare of the body. They don't make us or our society healthier, as they do not communicate rules useful for the governance of a city or the governance of a household. Such, for instance, are the prohibitions of the mingled stuff of kilayim, right, of wearing wool and linen together, right, or the mingling of diverse species, kilayim, growing, two different kinds of vegetables or fruits together, right, or meat and milk, or the commandment concerning the covering of blood, or the egla arufa, the breaking of the neck of the heifer when you find a corpse on the road, and things like that, or the firstling of an ass, bringing the firstborn donkey to the redeem, right? All of these things of the same kind seem to be things which have no obvious reason. So a lot of people are tempted to say, well, there is no reason. We just do it because God said so. Sometimes we do it because God said so. Or, well, there's a reason, but we don't know what it is. You just do it. There's a reason, whatever, but you don't know what it is. Now, the Rambam can't accept this, right? Because based on the Rambam's philosophy, right, and the way he's saying, you have to know the reason in order to achieve the goal of the mitzvah, right? You can't just say, I'm doing it for no reason. There has to be a reason so you understand what you're going to gain from it. So that's what other people say, but you will hear my explanation for all of them and my exposition of the correct and demonstrated causes for them, right? With the sole exception, as I mentioned to you, of details and particular commandments. So here's the key. I'm going to explain to you the bottom line reason for every mitzvah, the Rambam says. This is a pretty bold statement. We'll see after we go through the next bunch of chapters whether we agree that he accomplished his goal or not. But I'm going to tell you, Rambam says, but the basic reason for the mitzvah, I'm not going to bother telling you, we have certain mitzvot that have a million different, laws that apply to it. And Rambam already said this a few chapters ago, and he's saying it again now. I'm not going to sit here and tell you why, why you have to do this exactly like this, exactly like that. But I'm going to give you the basic reason for each mitzvah. I shall explain that all these and others of the same kind are indubitably related to one of the three notions referred to, even though you don't see it obviously, right? So the mitzvah of kilayim, of not mixing wool and linen together, I will show you, the Rambam says, how it fits into one of those three categories. Remember the three categories. A, it teaches us an idea, right? An idea that's truth, that brings us closer to truth. B, it teaches us a way to get along better with one another. Or C, it teaches us a way to not cause friction between one another, right? Those are the three possibilities for a mitzvah. All mitzvot, according to the Rambam, will fit into one of those three categories, right? Even the things that don't seem to make sense, like the ones he just listed. Or the welfare of the conditioned city, which is achieved through two things: abolition of reciprocal wrongdoing and acquisition of excellent characters. Sum up what we have said concerning beliefs as follows. In some cases, a commandment communicates a correct belief. He's reiterating this again because it's important to remember as we begin, which we're going to do next week, as we begin to start attacking the reasons for the mitzvot, okay? So, one, commandment communicates a correct belief. I just turned to page 514, by the way, which is the one and only thing aimed at, as for instance, the belief in the unity or the eternity of the deity or as not being a body. So some mitzvot are going to lead us to those beliefs, those ideas which are crucial. In other cases, the belief is necessary for the abolition of reciprocal wrongdoing. Sometimes it's going to be teaching us how to not act badly towards one another, or for the acquisition of a noble moral quality, or the opposite, it teaches us how to act better towards one another. As for instance, the belief that he may be exalted has a violent anger against those who do injustice. So sometimes the Torah will tell you that, and again, he uses this example, that God is angry against someone who does something bad. That's in order to inculcate in us an incentive, right, not to act badly towards one another, right? According to what is said, in my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill, and so on. And as the belief that he may be exalted responds. Another example is when it says that he responds instantaneously to the prayer of someone wronged or deceived, right? And it shall come to pass when he cries unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. So here you have Rambam saying, and this touches on the idea of prayer in general, which according to Rambam, it doesn't work. Exactly how prayer works is a subject which we're not going to address tonight. But it doesn't work in that way that God listens and has mercy, because mercy is a human emotion, right? So when God says that if you do wrong to someone else, I will listen and I will be angry at you, right? What's being described there is a reality, right? That if you act unkindly to one another, you're going to have a society of wrath. You're going to have a society of suffering, right? It's a good way to put in front of people to say, you make someone suffer and he starts to cry to me, it's going to come around and get you, right? So watch out, right? So and that's why the Torah lays it out in that way, even in that anthropomorphic way, even though that's not actually what happens. It's not actually, because God doesn't have feelings like you and I do, but society is set up in such a way. So that's how all these mitzvot are going to be explained. And and we're going to give Rambam, of course, the chance over the next several months to show us how this works. And that's the fun that's all beginning. So it's obviously this is a perfect part to stop and open the floor for questions, comments, etc.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Is he going to explain the linen wool thing as well as the red heifer? Did he hit that?
The red heifer, not so much, but the wool and linen he will explain.
Okay.
I'm not going to give it away, although you can Google as well as anyone else, and I'm sure you'll find it. But he will explain it. Yeah, and like I said, you may or may not like his reasons. So many of his reasons, are interesting and thought provoking. Some of them are kind of related to his way of thinking in his time, which might not resonate with us in 2025. But
Does he
but
discuss the exceptions like the red heifer? I mean, okay, if he can't explain it, why observe it? Does he talk about that?
um to some degree, yes, but he insists that there's a reason for that too, right?
It's hidden, right?
Right. It's not so much that it's hidden, it's just we have to work really hard to figure it out. And
But
one
he
day we
can't
might
figure it.
figure it out,
Okay.
right?
But he
But
can't.
uh but but the fact that there is definitely a reason. And it's not so hidden that it's impossible. It's just something that none of us have ever really achieved.
Including,
Um we can,
but does he
maybe.
admit that he can't figure it out?
No, he didn't figure it out. But he did figure out a lot of other ones that are tough. Like Shatnez, the mix of wool and linen is one of them. But well, like I said, every reason that the Rambam gives, there's 20 different Rishonim that argue and say that he's wrong. So you'd be in good shoes if you say, well, I like this one or I don't like that one. Don't feel terrible. You're allowed to disagree. I mean, people have what the Rambam writes, that I wrote in my text this morning because it's one of the most controversial, because each one of his Tamei HaMitzvot spins off, the whole volume, libraries full of books, agreeing, disagreeing, arguing, not liking it, liking it, you know.
Let
So
me ask you just one question before we
yeah,
move on. The linen wool thing, the high priest or the priests were able to mix the two, right?
right.
Does he explain why they carve out the exception for the priests?
Man, you're really trying to wait. We'll get
Okay,
there.
okay, I'll be patient. Okay, I'll be patient.
All right. Anyway, anything else?
So can I give him a hint?
Sure, go ahead.
Please.
Jeff, add the words Cain and Hevel to your search.
Okay. How do I spell that?
Cain and Abel.
Oh, Cain and Abel. Right.
All right. Well,
Okay.
so believe me, we'll have a lot of fun. It'll be very interesting these next while. He's gonna go off a little bit before Tamei HaMitzvot on some other stuff, but he's laying the groundwork. And to this week was some of the key parts of the groundwork to understand this entire section. So it was an important night. If that's it, we'll close for the evening. And the Emir Tashem, next week we'll be back online Wednesday night, and wishing everyone a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so.
you.
Thank you.
All right, be well.
Thank you.
Well, yes, right.